Welcome back to the Healthy Commute. I'm Dr. Dan with Dr. Pascal. So first of all, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
If you're listening to this, it is January in 2021. We made it through 2020. I think a lot of people have been thinking that exact same kind of thing for a while. Like, let's get this year, out and start a new year. But at the same time, anytime we go through, kind of an experience like that, a tough year like that, there's always things that there's pearls of wisdom in there that we could use to then set ourselves up for success, moving forward. So today what we want to kind of review is probably our top 3 things that we can think of to help you kind of succeed in 2021, but with what did we kind of learn from 2020 and incorporate that together.
Absolutely. And just because we turned over a new calendar year, it doesn't mean, we're out of the we're not out of this mess yet.
Yes.
So we also have to take what we've learned and let's start the new year off on the right foot and incorporate some of these things we've learned now so that we're not, playing catch up all year. We're not trying to not being able to get off the hamster wheel, if you will.
Exactly. Right. So a key thing, a few things I guess maybe to start with is what did we learn from 2020? And I think both of us have seen that as we saw patients coming through last year, is that I think the number one thing is if we don't move, we break down.
100%. There's no doubt about it. It was even as much as we know this, we've never seen it on this level before, right?
Yep.
So like what we've been talking about for years with people, we've had like the perfect science experiment now to see it and see just the multitudes of people coming in the door with all these new pain syndromes because they're not moving.
Because exactly what happened was, right, we had the shutdown, right? So life basically stood still in kind of middle of March till about the beginning of May for most people. And what happened was people kind of went away from, going to the office, and then they transferred. And if they were lucky enough to continue their job and do it from home, that was great. But what they ended up doing was, working from the kitchen table, working on the counter, not having that routine that they normally do, let's say to get up in the morning, go to the gym, go to work, walk around the office, go to meetings, go for lunch, go for a walk outside at lunch. What basically happened is they got out of bed and they went right to the kitchen table and their normal routines or habits were gone.
Yeah.
And that change of just not that sedentary lifestyle started to cause all kinds of issues, right? So more stiffness, more soreness, more pain, and obviously much more stress that just continued and that caused all of that. But just the lack of normal movement caused just all of these problems to kind of show up.
Absolutely. And it's not just pain, like you mentioned, it's not just pain related. I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Peter Attia and a doctor who specializes in hormones, and he was talking about even young 20-year-olds who look lean and very fit. When they're not exercising, they're starting to develop resistance to insulin and to blood sugar. They're starting to get these blood sugar problems just because they're not exercising and sitting on the couch. So,
right.
Even though you might not be perceiving the ill effects, they are developing already in the background when we don't move. Right? So the number one thing is move.
Right. So I guess what did we learn? Obviously, yes, we need to move. But now I think that now that things have maybe settled a little bit, if people have had, time to change their home setup or their work schedule or whatever, we need to absolutely make sure that regardless of under whatever circumstances you are, movement needs to be an absolutely key piece for you to have a great healthy year moving forward, right? So whether that's during the day, like that you're not sitting for more than 30 to 45 minutes. Sometimes we talk about 30 every 30 minutes move for 30 seconds. It's whether it's your setup, your proper setup to make sure that you're either ideally standing or sitting, a sit-stand desk, or the proper setup so that your spine and body's in the proper position. But nothing beats just getting up, going for a walk, taking a break. If we have that ability because we're working at home, we could kind of map out how we're going to do our day, but make sure that we're moving every single day.
And I think a key factor there, a key component, is to measure it.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, almost, it's very available to everybody, whether it's a Fitbit. I think you can even track it with just even like your iPhone. You don't even need a watch. You can track your steps through like the health app on the health phone. But get some sort of health tracker that allows you to track your movement throughout the day. Because then, anything that is measured grows, right?
Yeah.
And so we measure it, we can monitor it, and at the end of the day, if you haven't moved enough, well, that should be the, your call at that time to get up, go do 10-15 minutes of exercise before winding down for the rest of your day.
So maybe some cool tech stuff that people could use, and I think both of us have something different. But you've just recently got the Aura Ring.
Correct.
And so for people that maybe have never heard of it, what the Aura Ring is basically it's a ring that has some sensors that measures key components of overall health and wellness in terms of heart, steps, activity. So maybe you want to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's really not as much of an activity tracker. So I would say something like the Apple Watch or a Fitbit, if someone wants to track their activity, might be a better tool, because this is not going to give you your heart rate or how hard you worked out or anything like that. But it will track your activity throughout the day. And it's really more of a rest component. We'll talk about it in the rest component, but what it does allow me to do is it shows me how active I was throughout the day, and basically, how much I exerted myself for how much I rested. So it tells me, well, you rested this well, you should be exerting yourself this much today. So it allows me to measure how well I'm recovering, but also how active I should be. And then it tells me, well, yesterday you weren't very active, so today you should be more active. And so it's interlinked with an app on my phone that gives me recommendations based on the trends it's measuring for me. It tells me what time I should go to bed. And I mean, it's brilliant to be able to have this third-party accountability, right, that has no biased opinion about me. It's just data.
So now the key factor, though, is how has that either changed what you would normally do with this new information?
Right, and I think the biggest thing for me, how it's changing, is it's changing, for me, it's more about the sleep.
Okay.
So we'll get into that to the next bullet point, because I don't want to jump ahead in terms of rest. It hasn't changed too much in terms of activity and movement for me, because I think in general I've always been someone that's loved activity and been sort of self-motivated. I have changed my activities because the gyms are closed, so I've done a lot more walking and running outdoors, and what's changed is my belief about outdoors running, because I've always been very, very frigid, I guess, in my belief system. I hate running outside when it's cold, and I've told myself that for how many years, and I've never done it. Well, this year, guess what? I'm very limited on things to do. And you know what I love? I went out this morning and ran for an hour outside in the cold, and I loved every single minute of it. Why? Because I was forced to change, and then to change my belief about that behavior. And so now I run outdoors and I do some light weights inside, but to try to be active every day. So I have every single day, I either have a run or I have my 1 hour workout at home every single day. That is the routine I've created myself to keep that accountability and consistency.
Perfect.
So this ring, unfortunately for that, doesn't help me other than showing me how much I've moved in terms of steps throughout the day, which is
like
nice.
you mentioned earlier about, let's say, even using, if people have either an iPhone or an Apple Watch, in terms of measuring either their steps or their activity, but also with the Apple Watch, if people have that, it basically it helps you, nudge you in terms of making sure that you have, let's say, some goals that you've set every day, and it reminds you, hey, by the way, there's still a little bit of room for improvement here. You could maybe move or do a little bit of a workout or a little bit more of a walk to make sure you enable yourself to move as much as we can during the day.
Absolutely.
Now, talking about, you said, like, let's say during COVID, gyms were closed and normal activity was massively reduced. Now, I know we talked about this on a previous podcast, that movement is probably more beneficial than just hardcore exercise on its own.
Absolutely.
So meaning that it's more important to continuously move your body, as opposed to staying stagnant and not moving for 12 hours and then exerting yourself ridiculously for an hour or two. That could sometimes cause more injuries for the patient, for the people, right? So what we're talking about moving is, yes, if there's a gym, or if you've had to change your behavior because now you're going for workouts at home, or you're running outside, you're doing things, that's great. But it doesn't mean that you only have to do these workouts. All we're asking you to do is move. So go for walks up, and even in your house. I have a patient that she's struggling with some different health issues. So for her, she's committed to walk 10,000 steps per day inside her home, because for her it could only be for a small duration of time. So she literally walks around her island and up and down the corridor, but ensures that she could still get 10,000 steps a day. And how does she know that? She measures it.
Yeah.
She measures it with her tracking devices, which I think could be great in that scenario.
Absolutely. So absolutely, take the time to move. It's more important than maybe you'll even feel momentarily. It has a huge impact on your health, not only today, but moving forward and creating those habits of living an active lifestyle, because we know that is one of our best defenses in terms of health promotion, right?
Yeah. Now, number one will also tie into number two.
Correct.
So number two is basically, we need to take the time to reset and recover and heal. And I think that's another thing that we also noticed during 2020 is the amount of pressure and stress that came, instantly, right?
Instantly.
So, went from, let's say, the shutdown to people losing their jobs, to not moving, to the worry, the pressure and stress that came along with that. Now people weren't able to sleep. That just created this downward spiral of pressure, stress, and it just caused all kinds of symptoms and issues with people, right? So I think in there, what we have to understand is, regardless, we can't sometimes change the effects that happen around us, but what we can control is what can we do to enable us to properly recover, rest, and heal, to enable us to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think the number one thing is sleep, proper sleep, right? Because that's where you're really getting your biggest reset, right? And if you don't move enough throughout the day, you're going to have a hard time sleeping, because you're not building up, you're not taxing yourself enough to sleep properly. So yes, number one ties into number two. And then we can talk about also how, movement can take on the form of rest and reset, something like yoga, right? So it could be also exercising, you want to move, but it could be a form of almost a meditative exercise like yoga, where you're exercising but also resting your mind and sort of rejuvenating at the same time, right? So there could be as form of sleep, resting, exercise, or one of the other big ones is meditation. Those would probably be, I think, the big categories, if you will.
And I think, I'm speaking from experience in this, but a lot of times we think that our bodies could just go on forever. Sometimes that we hum, think of it as an engine at just 8,000 RPMs, just revving, and we think we could keep that up forever. Now we physically can't. Just like an engine cannot just stay at that level and continue to perform well. It can rise up to that level, but it needs that time to rest and recuperate. So a lot of times we're there and we don't even know that we're humming at that high level for so long, until something like this taxes our bodies even more, and then that thing's when breaks down, right? So obviously it affects our mental health, our sleeping ability, our healing ability, everything kind of affects. So if we could learn anything from 2020 is, regardless of how we quote unquote feel at the time, we still need to rest and recuperate. So what could we do on a daily basis, right? And we'll talk about this in number 3 in terms of habits, but what could we do on a daily basis to rest and recuperate properly? So number 1, like you talked about sleep, is, well, it's not just, I'll just sleep and whatever happens. It's no, what could you do to set up yourself to sleep well? From what time to what time? What can you do during the day to lower, kind of the bandwidth of your mind? So whether it's meditation, doing a 10 or 15 minute yoga practice, just even breathing, what could we do to reduce and slow down that brain to allow the body to recuperate?
And that's where, for me, again, we can get into technology, and that was the main reason I had picked up the ring, was to see, with all this extra stress and everything going on and having young kids at home, I wanted to see, okay, how well is my body dealing with stress? Because we've talked about this before, the I guess system in the body that deals with stress is the nervous system, and we can see how well we're managing stress by measuring something called heart rate variability, and then seeing what that heart rate variability is throughout the night to see how well our body is resting, recuperating, and managing stress. So that I think the Apple Watch also does the same thing.
That's right.
It's the same data. I believe the Whoop band can give you that same data. But it's good to measure that stuff and understand, okay, how is my nervous system doing in terms of dealing with this onslaught of stress? And then how well am I sleeping? How well am I recovering? So not only, how is my HRV, but how good are my sleep habits? And these devices tell you things about, like the quality of sleep that you're getting, how restful it is, how many times you're waking up throughout the night. It tells you the number of hours you're actually asleep. It'll give you recommendations based on your patterns of when you should be sleeping and should be waking up. I mean, measuring that stuff is phenomenal to help you rest and recover. And I'd say that that's where this has made me change most of my habits, is trying to get to bed by a certain time, because the Ring noticed for me that my optimal time for going to bed was 8:45 to 9:45 p.m. That's what this has told me so far, is like, you need to shut down early. That's when you get your best rest.
And I think what technology can provide us is, like you mentioned, like, well, how stressed is my body at this moment? And then I could then gauge what I could do moving forward. So meaning that if your body is already under massive amount of pressure and stress, to then do a massive workout or whatever else you had planned that day, if you're going to tax it even more, it'll make it even harder for your body to recover. So meaning that if your body, let's say if you haven't slept well the last 2 nights, maybe nutrition wasn't at its best, maybe stress was kind of high, then at that point you could go, actually, what I really need now, instead of that hour, massive hard run, maybe it's the 30 minutes of calm yoga that I need more to help my body recover. So technology could help us, push us along the right path to enable us to, again, rest, properly so that we could then be at our best.
Absolutely, because if we stress out too much, we then tank our immune system. With everything that's happened this year, we know that the last thing we want to do is have a depressed or weakened immune system, right?
Exactly. Right.
And which brings us really into the third thing that we've learned is those healthy habits, because healthy habits absolutely matter, right? There's no doubt about it. Healthy habits that help push us, I guess, on that continuum of health versus sickness, those healthy habits which help push us towards health have is greater overall effects for us in years of increased stress like this.
Right. And a lot of times our habits are based on our beliefs.
Correct.
So what do we believe about exercise? What do we believe about nutrition? What do we believe about sleep? Let's say, for example, what are my beliefs about sleep? Do I think it's that important or not? Then our behavior will then follow that, what we understand.
Correct.
Now, hopefully 2020 has also taught us, oh wow, I thought this about this, or maybe I didn't prioritize this as much. So hopefully we've learned different beliefs, or we're believing differently because they're like, actually exercise is that much more important. I didn't think it mattered as much, but now that I went without it for a few months and I realized the effects it did on my body, now I need to prioritize it even more. Or the same thing could go for sleep or nutrition or meditation or yoga or any of these practices. So healthy habits matter, and we've seen that in time after time with patients. And it doesn't have to be these massive, one patient is going one way and all of a sudden they transform their life and goes completely out of the way. Really, what I've seen work the best is when people make small
changes,
consistent changes over time.
Yep.
So don't change everything all at once, is change small things over time and just continuously do them over and over. So for example, exercise.
Yep.
Don't commit to doing 2 hours of exercise a day. If you went from no exercise, that's not going to last.
Right.
What I would rather you do is go, I want to do consistently 5 minutes per day. And what that happens is it just creates a habit.
Yep.
And then you create that 5 minutes, and I can guarantee you sometimes that 5 minutes will turn into 15.
Yep.
And great, but you're committing to 5. And that is more of a realistic, long, term change, which will, again, cause those habits to be better.
And the habits, the hard part with the habits in a year like 2020, again, when you have nothing to anchor it to, because every day is Groundhog Day, you get up, same thing, you go from your bed to the kitchen to your computer, routine goes out the window a little bit. So it's like learning to anchor those habits and creating your own routine regardless of what your day looks like. So even if you're not going anywhere that day, at 5 p.m. that's your, that's where I work out. Or, you get up in the morning, drink a cup of coffee, 10 minutes of meditation, 15-minute walk, and that's your success strategy for that day. So it's trying to create that habit and recreate it every single day or in some sort of consistent fashion. That's where we're going to get our best results.
Yeah. So maybe in kind of a recap, we talked about the top 3 things that we could do to really ensure that 2021, regardless of what happens, will be a great year. Is number 1, we talked about moving, right? So, and we talked about obviously about rest and recover and habits, but incorporating a healthy habit of moving every single day is essential. Now, moving could be anything from walking, gym, your postural stretches and exercises, but just getting your body moving is absolutely key to be healthy overall.
Go tobogganing.
Go tobogganing, absolutely. Number 2, we talked about taking the time to rest, recuperate, to be able to properly heal. So that's anywhere from your sleep, your meditation, your yoga, anything that allows your body to kind of slow down to be able to be at your best moving forward. And then obviously number 3 is to create those small healthy habits to ensure that everything could kind of continuously improve over time. So hopefully that gave you some food for thought, and even I would challenge you just for yourself. You think about what did you learn from 2020? What were the kind of the gaps that you saw that if you could kind of fill in for this year to make sure that this is another great year for yourself. So again, thanks for listening to us. We appreciate it. If you have any questions, concerns, you can give us a call here at the office, 204-474-1159. And with that, we hope that you have a great rest of your healthy commute.